July 2nd, 2022. Well, the year is half over. I guess technically at noon today, if you count days, specifically. But I want to kind of do an update on the kind of a state of political play here in the wake of a lot of Supreme Court decisions and statements in administration, the state of the economy, and politics. Kind of a wrap up where we are right now as we head into the midterm elections, as I see it anyhow. Okay, one issue that's kind of come up, of course, is the overturn of Roe v. Wade and the impact that's going to have on the elections. And anything that we can say at this point in time that would, see so far I see little to no impact from the decision on the election so far. There's a little concern I had that putting it out right now, 4 months before the election, as opposed to doing it after the election, not that I don't support, I totally agree with the decision constitutionally, might have been better, but again, this is not a political court really. If it was political, they definitely would have ruled differently on the Remain in Mexico policy, which they kind of effectively sided with the administration on. And I think that was largely because of just the fact that the president can presumably put an executive order out, which is what Remain in Mexico was, an executive order, not a law as such. And on the other hand, the president can repeal it. Remember, there was a lot of trouble the court with the previous configuration had on the issue of Trump trying to repeal some of the previous administration's executive orders. A little bit of hypocrisy there, but it's also a different cast of characters right now too, in terms of different people on the court. So that including Barrett, for instance. So I think that probably reflects what's going on there. But let's look at the big picture. One thing I look at is the Real Clear Politics average of the generic ballot. Before the decision came down, we were at 3.4% Republican advantage, and right now we're at 2.2. Not a massive change, and when you consider that the two very one very liberal, or I say particularly two, but definitely one very liberal-oriented poll were taken right immediately as that decision came down, where the maximum fanfare was going on, and the NPR poll particularly, I'm suspicious of anyhow, kind of came into the mix, and some other things fell out. There's a little bit of fluctuation in the Rasmussen between Republicans +8 and Republicans +5. So when you look at the average, I don't know that means a lot at this point. I mean, even a given poll, say like Rasmussen, could fluctuate from 8 to 5 without any real change in politics, just due to sampling variation. And in fact, the real number could be, having 6.5, could be the truth, and sample one time's off a little bit high, off a little bit low, if that makes any sense to anybody mathematically there. So bottom line, I'll belabor it, I don't see a major change yet. We'll continue to monitor that as time goes forward. And I think a lot of the fanfare that's already kind of dropping off because other issues have kind of come in to dominate the news. One thing that came in, which is very interesting, is the statements that were made in Europe and in Washington by a top economic advisor, particularly where he said that they have to keep oil prices high in order to protect the liberal world order, which is kind of shades of, well, what is this, the Great Reset that they're talking about? Remember years ago the talk of the New World Order, right, and so forth. Now, and that's that. Whether it's really as sinister as it might sound, you also have to realize that the way things go in politics, such as the story that Cassidy Hutchinson threw out, which is largely false, it's still used by the other side. So I think that constitutes a gaffe. And of course, President Biden said that, asking how long will the oil prices and gas prices have to remain high, he said as long as it takes, which indicates that that's he's counting on his support for Ukraine to be sufficient for people to put up with this. And I think most people are not that involved in Ukraine, one way or the other. And so I think that bodes fairly well for the Republicans continuing to take a lead in the election. The other thing about these, um, you know, generic ballots, I've seen times when the Republicans were like a -5 in a generic ballot and won quite well. Uh, this is it depends on a lot of factors, but I mean, one thing you have to realize is there's a lot of districts in the country that are so Democrat that that they win by 60, 70, 80% of the vote or whatever. And if when you mix those in with narrower districts where the Republicans can win with 5% of the vote or 8% of the vote, something at parity probably means a pretty good sized Republican victory in the House. The Senate's a little different, and I think we have some issues there that are kind of self-inflicted. For instance, the big push by President Trump because of his personal animosity against Governor Kemp of Georgia, I think may bite us in the rear on that seat, because we had Perdue running against Kemp and losing spectacularly. And then they picked Herschel Walker, who's an untested political figure, never run for office again, and therefore not adequately vetted, put up against Raphael Warnock. That's radical liberal Raphael Warnock, if you remember. So, but the point is, I guess his illegitimate children situation, which you kind of expect with a big athletic star, right? It's kind of popped up and temporarily it's kind of knocked him down in the polls. Of course, the poll that we basically have is the Quinnipiac, which I'm not wild about Quinnipiac. It has occasionally been right, surprisingly, but often it tends to be highly biased to the left. So I wouldn't totally panic here, but that was not the best move. It'd been better to have had Perdue run against Warnock, where you had a tested, previously winning candidate who narrowly lost in the runoff and had won the popular vote, in the previous election, and instead of having him challenge an incumbent governor who was in a pretty strong position, decided to throw that away just because he's angry. That's my view on that. But and then we had the decision to support Oz over McCormick in Pennsylvania, and then we had a knockdown, drag-out primary, which currently leaves Oz at a deficit. However, I think the Oz might be able to recover by the election day, because that's kind of a post-primary. Anytime you have a tough primary, you end up usually your own party is down from where it might only be, and this one at least occurred far enough in advance of the election that things might move in the correct direction. On the good side, I think we're running better than expected in Nevada, and potentially with the pick of, admittedly, the moderate candidate, but the moderate candidate in Colorado, I think there's a fair chance that there might be pickups there. So, anyway, all in all, I think there's a chance of winning the Senate, and at least, hopefully, at a minimum, holding the 50-50 balance in a worst-case scenario. Because that's the key thing there, is to preserve the filibuster and prevent radical Democrat policies from becoming law. And they have a lot of radical ones to pass if they ever got the one vote advantage, to end the filibuster. But then again, if we were to hold the House by a significant majority, they might not want to do that anymore, because they might fear they'll lose the Senate in the next election and they couldn't get it through the House anyhow. So that's kind of my view on that situation. I understand there's a little bit of developments on the Hutchison thing. It's still unclear to me from what I'm reading whether they know who the people that tried to contact Cassidy Hutchison were or not. There is the potential idea of a charge of trying to influence a witness. And remember, if you've got the Biden administration Justice Department making the decision whether it's a worthy case or not, that could be dangerous. I'm hoping that they have not been able to actually identify conclusively who did this. I think it was a very foolish thing to try that late in the game, because it was pretty clear, I think, she'd already flipped to the other side, I guess. And, did they really think she was going to flip back at the last minute? I think that especially the wording was a little scary. I mean, you know, um, I think more strategic wording would have been safer. Let's put it that way. Such as, don't go out and tell any lies, don't spread rumors and things like that. That would be one thing. But if you sort of say, are you a team player and are you going to protect the person that needs to be protected? If they can identify who said that, that could be very dangerous to that person legally, I think. But that doesn't that I care. It's like I said, if it was an anonymous call that was not understood over a burner phone purchased by cash at some obscure source, maybe that'd be a whole different issue. You know what I'm saying? At any rate, I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying that too much, but I'm just saying that's something to keep an eye on. What could come out of that? Hopefully, nothing. Um, on her story itself, as I mentioned in the previous video, I think is falling apart even more seriously than I thought it was in my previous video. So, I think it'll be interesting to see what comes of that and whether they really do bring the Secret Service people in to testify under oath publicly or whether they simply ignore it. Because, I mean, all in all, they're really just putting out canned, um, you know, pre-recorded videos for fear the person might say something different live during the testimony. And again, I urge everybody to vote against uh, Cheney in the Wyoming primary. I know I threw my $25 into her opponent the other day. I really would like to see her defeated. I think the kind of treason to the party's interest is just over the top bad. I mean, it's one thing to stand up for law and order, but this is beyond that. This is supporting the Pelosi line all the way. I mean, if she at least did mock cross-examination, trying to elicit, are you really on the level, or you know what I mean? She's not even playing like she's on our side at all. She's clearly playing like she's on their side, and that's really unacceptable. Well, at any rate, that's kind of my view. So I think we're still doing okay on the election. A little still worried about the Senate, but then I always was. Um, and on the other hand, we we have to look at the possibility, though, that we can win a few seats that we otherwise, might be more traditionally Democrat. And at this point, for this particular election, as long as we have people that are not full-scale rhinos, we're doing good. And Laxalt, on the other hand, I think is a very strong conservative. So if he can win Nevada, that'd be a great thing. So, at any rate, we'll wrap this up for now, and until next time. By the way, my addresses of my social media accounts are below, and we'll wrap this up. Have a happy 4th.